Hey there, how's it going? Welcome back to the Let's Play world, and welcome back to Westfall. If you don't know what this project is, then head back and watch the last 2 episodes. Go on, I'll wait. You back? Great, let's get started. Today's episode is all about donkeys. I want to breed a super fast donkey, and in order to do that, I'm going to be creating a whole donkey breeding farm, which is going to go in this big area that I terraformed last episode. I'm so excited to get started. This is going to be fun. Now, this project starts, as most projects start for me, with ilmango. In these 2 SciCraft episodes, he essentially pushes donkey speed breeding to the maximum and automates the process as much as possible. Now, I won't be replicating this setup because 1, I don't want to do any AFKing, and 2, I don't want to use bots. He uses one to hold a golden carrot and literally has the donkeys run for their life. And if they're not fast enough, well, it is a cool concept, but it's pretty cruel. And you know what? It's probably for the best that I'm gonna be avoiding this one. I'm the kind of player that really wants to treat my donkeys gently and care for their well-being. So with those 2 factors out, what am I left with? Well, to start, there's the actual breeding stalls themselves. The way that this design works is the donkey's hitbox barely fits on the edge of this anvil so they won't fall in. But if I breed them, the baby has nowhere to go and will just drop down into the water stream. From there, the baby will funnel into a 1-block space and get picked up by a minecart, which will deposit it over at another set of stalls. The way that these work is the powered activator rail will dismount the donkey, and there's no other place for it to go besides the pressure plate, which will unpower the activator rail, allowing the next donkey to continue to the next available stall. The reason this works is because, for some reason, activator rails won't dismount things on top of scaffolding blocks, leaving the last available block the one above. So once the donkeys are in their stalls, you'll have to wait for them to mature into an adult, after which you can tame them and determine their speed. Now in ilmango's video, he uses a mini HUD feature to just show the donkey's speed when he's on it. But I wanted to do something more vanilla, and I always thought it would be fun to make a speed testing track. So I started with this design by Bjork Minecraft. It's a simple concept. You run across a tripwire which will unlock a hopper minecart and pull items out of a chest until you reach the finish line, which will lock it again. The resulting item count in the minecart is the horse's speed. The lower the count, the faster the horse. Now for this design, you have to manually reset the timer by removing the items and placing them back in the chest above. But I thought it would be cool to be able to press a button and have it reset automatically. And the execution isn't too much more complicated. I can just push up another hopper minecart, which will pull out the drops and send them to a dropper elevator that hooks back to the barrel at the top. Where it got tricky though was trying to compact it down and relocate some of the circuitry underground. My final design here triggers a pulse extender that will keep the minecart up long enough to extract all the items. And while it's doing that, a redstone lamp will indicate whether the system is done resetting or not. The pulse extender is accessible here and can be adjusted, which will be useful because as I breed faster horses, I don't need to use as many items and I can reduce the time it takes to reset. I also switched to a bubble column instead of a dropper elevator, which was too bulky. And finally, I redid the tripwire line so that it's underground and snakes up to the activator rail at the top. All I gotta do is connect a track to it and this thing is done. So with that all out of the way, you're looking at the basic design for this setup. A donkey breeder that will separate out the babies and send them to storage where they can be tamed and brought to a speed testing track. From there, if the donkey is faster, then it'll replace the slowest one at the breeder, and the slower ones will, It's not important just yet, don't worry about it. But that's enough to get started here, and I've already figured out the aesthetics. I want the area to be kind of like a ranch. So instead of doing a big facility, it's gonna be a bunch of smaller structures connected to each other by pathways and laid out to optimize the process. The breeder is gonna be a barn, and that's going right in the middle here, and the baby donkeys that come out of it will get sent underground over to a large array of stables, where I can take a donkey from storage, test its speed along the track, and right from there take it to the breeder if it's faster. This'll all make more sense when it's built, and look at the time. I'm due for another time lapse. All right, there it is. You know, despite these structures not being very large, they've actually made this area feel pretty developed already. Of course, there's a lot more that I'm gonna be doing today, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the design. First of all, unlike the buildings I made down below, nothing up here is based directly on something from Westfall and World of Warcraft. There just aren't any structures from there that fit the whole horse ranch theme. Instead, everything here was designed from scratch, but I did them in a way that makes them feel similar to everything else. I mainly focused on using the same block palette and incorporating similar details. The barn here is the most obvious example of this, with the stripped woods, stone foundation, and hay bale roof. Now, the architecture itself is based on what's called a monitor style barn, which I chose because 1, it looked the most interesting, and 2, because it's the style most commonly used to house horses. I know, shocker. At the moment though, mine isn't doing a very good job of that. Hey fellas, guess what? I've got a new home for you. And there's 1, 2, and 3. So I've got 3 breeding stalls here, which means I can make 3 baby donkeys every 5-minute cooldown, or 36 an hour. Correspondingly, over at the stables here, I have 48 slots available, so I'll have plenty of space to support over an hour of breeding. Everything here is the same as the design that I showed off earlier. It's the same activator rail setup, just copied into a big array. The one additional thing I needed to figure out though was how to make the transition between buildings without suffocating the donkeys in the ground above. And the solution I came up with was kind of funny to me because I was like, this isn't gonna work. But lo and behold, it does. For whatever reason, they don't take any damage going through composter blocks. And this worked out great because they're a perfect disguise since they look like feeding troughs. Everything else is as you would expect. When a baby is made at the breeder, a minecart will pick it up and bring it all the way over, drop it off at the first available slot, and then continue traveling back around until it finally returns to the barn to be recycled again. So this guy here that I bred for that demonstration just turned into an adult, so now it's time to test his speed. I can feed him sugar to increase the chances of taming, and 34 gets it all the way up to 100%. Once that's done, I can throw on my saddle, jump out of here, and here we are at the track. The design is meant to resemble one of those sandy horse training pens, and I incorporated some acacia wood into it, which isn't part of the usual material palette, but I like this choice because it kind of marks this area as being different from everything else in Westfall, and I think I'm gonna add some more things with acacia later on. I digress though, let's actually use this thing. When I run across the tripwire, some note blocks will trigger and play a repeating ticker sound effect that will go until I make it to the finish line, which will greet me with a cute little jingle. Now I can check the speed of the donkey with the mechanism I showed off earlier, and it looks like this guy is 36 blocks. With that in mind, I'll hit the button to automatically reset the system, and again, the redstone lamp will switch back on as soon as it's ready. All right, I've just got one of the parents here, and I'm doing a quick speed test to see if the baby was faster, and looks like it was. 40 is a lot slower, and that means this guy's gotta go. I think it's about time I stopped beating around the bush. He's gonna die. But what do you think I'm gonna do? Just whip out my sword and get to it? No. I can do so much better than that. One of the resources that I've never had much use for is arrows. I've collected so many of them from mob farms over the years, and I've only ever used like 1 for an infinity bow. I mean, there's just never been a reason to use chests and chests full of arrows. You see where I'm going with this, right? But this isn't quite good enough. It needs a little something extra. Much better. Multiply that by 9, add a clock to it, and now we're talking. Let's talk shop. How can I cram a bunch of donkeys into a chamber like this? Well, first it starts with this dismounting mechanism of my own design. The way it works is similar to before. The donkey's hitbox will barely sit on the edge of this block here, but triggering the tripwire will send a delayed signal out to pull the block back. This gives you enough time to ride the donkey in and dismount, whereafter it'll be sent down. Next, the donkey's got to get moved into the chamber, which is trickier than it might seem because their large hitboxes bump into a lot of stuff. Ultimately, I came up with this water stream setup enclosed by glass panes that'll bring them up and drop them down through the side of the chamber. And here's what everything looks like put together. The dismounter's in the middle, and that connects to the blast chamber on the right. What should I call it? How about the Rain of Fire? I also want to reuse any arrows that miss, so I've got this barrel here that'll send them back up to the dispensers. This can also be used to refill the system if it ever gets low on arrows. And once I added that, I realized I would need a way to get in, but also block the donkeys off, so I added this little piston door. When donkeys are in there, I'll leave it up, and when donkeys aren't in there, if you know what I mean, I'll open it up and grab the drops. And I'm not just gonna be recovering my arrows here too, I'm also gonna be getting back my saddles and a bit of leather. I know it's a little messed up, but hey, I don't wanna make it go to waste, and that's why I added a leather worker on the left here. This way I can trade some of that leather into emeralds and also buy more saddles if I ever need any. I'll also keep my refill arrows here as well. Okay, and just like that, this thing is done. Now I just gotta make it pretty. Huh, that was easy. I kid, of course. This took a few hours to design. How about I go build it real quick? Then we'll talk. Okay, nice. This was a fun building to design because I had a lot of creative freedom since, there's not really a designated building for horse slaughterhouse. Ultimately, I ended up basing it on this image here of a medieval bakery. I chose this one because it already fit the shape of the redstone design and the style was pretty similar to that of Westfall, so it wasn't hard to adapt. By the way, I'll link any reference images I use in the description so you can go see the full image or check out the original author. This also goes for any videos I mention or any other source that I don't consider to be my own. But I digress. Let's check this thing out. First of all, I flipped it so the entrance could be a smidge closer to the track. Plus, this is the better side and it's more exposed over here. The material palette is the same as before: stone foundation, stripped wood supports, and a hay bale roof. And the big chimney on the left is an extension of the chamber inside, which is encased in brick and hopefully will prevent the rest of the structure from catching fire. I can't say for sure yet though. Here's what I know. The first version of this thing I made in creative burned down, but this second version that we're looking at here has been good so far, so time will tell. Such is the risk, I guess, from a structure that houses something called the Rain of Fire. Anyways, the only other thing I'd mention here is I put in this little fireplace on the outside just because the area looked a little too plain otherwise. The interior is about what you'd expect. Storage on the right side now, and the Rain of Fire is on the left. The unloading stall is still in the middle. I guess that doesn't change when you flip it. So everything is ready to go now. I just filled up the system with arrows and I've tested it. It all works properly. There's only one holdup, and that's that I don't have the leather worker yet. In fact, I'm also supposed to have farming villagers here in my barn to trade emeralds for golden carrots. So why haven't I put them all in yet? Well, the answer is, I need to go get them. But more importantly, I need to get honey blocks. This isn't a necessary thing to do, but I thought it would be fun to use the old trap a villager in a composter with a honey block under it trick. And the reason why this works is the sticky properties of the honey block transmit through the bottom of the composter and prevents the villager from being able to jump out. And it's cool because the composter doubles as the villager's workstation. It also works with cauldrons, which is why I'm using it with the leather worker too. So, all that being said, I've got to get my hands on some honey, and I haven't done anything with bees yet since I updated my world back in episode 4, which means that I'm starting from scratch, and the first thing I gotta do is get some. Now, if I grow a sapling next to a flower in a plains biome, I get a 5% chance that the tree will have a beehive.
Later.
Oh, yes, finally. Come on, in you go. Nice, first beehive. So now I can let them out into this enclosure here. And where's the other guy? Come on, where are you? Aha, there we go. So now I can break the beehive and breed these guys. Fast forward about 2 hours and I've got probably about 20 bees here. I've just been breeding them and collecting honeycomb to make hives, and at this point I'd say I'm ready to build a farm. Now if I wanted, I could just use some bottles right here and it wouldn't take long. After all, I only need 5 blocks of honey, but if you know me well enough, you'll know that's not what I'm gonna do. I don't wanna do anything crazy, but I would like a small automatic farm that'll have a permanent place here in Westfall. And I considered putting it into my donkey breeding ranch, but decided against it since it's not really a relevant farm. Instead, I thought a perfect candidate would be at the bottom of the hill where I used to have my old farming town. I like this spot right here. It's about equidistant from the ranch and the ice road, which gives me some solid wiggle room to decide how it'll all come together later on. The only issue here is the terrain is in desperate need of some modification. For this whole Westfall project, the terrain consists of gentle rolling hills and relatively smooth flat terrain, so I've got my work cut out for me. I'm gonna start by taking down the mountain in the back, then I'm gonna smooth out all the terrain and blend it with the terraforming for the ranch. The final product should be a nice flat area to finally build my bee farm. Hit it. that was a bit more work than I was expecting. First of all, I decided to drain the river and cover it up to expand the space a little more and make the transition into the mountains feel a little smoother. I went through the hassle of actually draining the river for the same reason I also added jack-o'-lanterns underneath it. Mob proofing. Rivers spawn squids, fish, and if I just covered it up, drowned zombies. So by removing the water and lighting it up, I eliminated all those spawning options, which hopefully will help mitigate lag, and I don't know, it just felt like the right way to do it. But anyways, the rest of this area turned out great as well. I love how nicely it blends together with my previous terraforming project. I ended up doing more work than I originally planned for, but I wanted to go a bit further to really get everything nice, and I think I achieved that. It is funny though, because I put all this work in just so I could build this simple little building. This design is kind of cool because it's essentially a variation of my starter shack designed to tightly fit around the bee farm, which by the way is a tileable design by Shulkercraft, link down below. The idea is simple. It takes a comparator readout from the beehive, and when it reaches a signal strength of 5, which is when it's full of honey, that'll trigger a dispenser filled with bottles and harvest the honey. The filled honey bottles will get picked up by the hopper below and get sent to storage. For my setup, I added 5 slices and connected them to this interface on the side. Empty bottles go into the system via the chest at the top, and filled bottles end up in the chest at the bottom. Also, hidden ender chest. The farm isn't running yet though. I still need to go get the beehives and bees. So in theory, now that it's approaching nighttime, these 5 hives should all fill completely with bees. 3 bees per hive, so 15 bees. All right, and that should be good here. I'm also saving the extra ones here for later, and I should be able to get all of them. Or not. Okay, so I should be able to just place them in and they won't be able to escape through the hoppers. Okay, looking good. I don't know if I can get the last 2 hives in.
Eventually.
Okay, this thing is all set up now. I just put in 3 shulker boxes worth of glass bottles, so the system is all backfilled, which is important because the dispensers always need to have all 9 slots filled. Otherwise, they'll pick up the honey bottles. And yeah, if you didn't hear it already, I brought one of my kitties over here. Pretty sure he's stuck up there. Not gonna help him down though. And if I look in here, I'm getting some honey. So I can take these bottles, open up the hidden crafting table, make them into honey blocks, and recycle the bottles back into the system. Project complete. This is exactly what I was going for. Just a quick and simple honey farm. Enough to get me by until I eventually, you know, build some sort of mega farm with a big project around it. You know me. But let's talk about this little area. It serves no function, but I thought it would be nice to have something that clues you into what's actually going on here, and I think I did a good job conveying that message. I've got a circle of mini trees with bee nests in them that surround a patch of flowers with some hives and honey reservoirs. There are even a few bees that pop out from time to time and give it some life. Now, gorgeous as this area is, you might be wondering though why I bothered making these detailed orange trees instead of, you know, using leaves. And this is not an accident or an arbitrary choice, but I'm not going to tell you why just yet. Instead, I'm first going to get these honey blocks into place and move the villagers over. So I'm over here on the other side of Ranch Mountain. You like that? I just came up with it. Anyways, I'm over here by the villager breeders that I use to produce all the guys for my trading hall, and I'm gonna get my villagers here. I've already got 4 farmers, and this guy can be the leather worker. After I'm done moving these guys, I'll dismantle the first 2 breeders, but the 3rd one is staying for now. I'll still need it for the next episode. Come on, get in the minecart. And haha, gotcha. Okay, this should work good. Moment of truth, let's send it. Here we go. Get in, get in. Nice. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Numero dos. Hey, come on. No. No, I got stuck in the composter. Ender pearl, ender pearl. Ooh, okay. Where'd he go? Oh, that's rich. Oh, that was dumb. I've already made that mistake before. This is so much fun. Oh, come on. Oh, you rat bat! So the villager placement went well. They're all in place now, and it was very pleasant. That's a joke. It took me an hour, and I wanted to rip my eyes out. I did learn the trick to it, I think. If I push them in from a block above, they'll much more easily fall in. After all that fuss, I legitimately think that their API will not let them walk into the composter otherwise. So my guess is that by dropping them, you basically trick their pathfinding into falling in. Just a quick little tip to anyone who might want to use this trick for themselves. Okay, so at this point, I'm all set up, and I can now start mass breeding and speed testing my donkeys. just as soon as I take care of one more thing. For every baby donkey I'll produce, I'm gonna be using half a stack of sugar for taming. And come on, you know me at this point, I'm gonna build a sugarcane farm. But now I'm faced with an interesting issue, because you see, everything I've built has been carefully designed to fit the whole Westfall theme. And one of the big aspects of that is to make sure everything looks dry and drotted, and having a nice lush green field of sugarcane just wouldn't look right. So instead, for this one, I'm opting to build it underground, and that brings me to this notch in the mountain right here. When I designed this mountain range, I specifically made this spot with the intention of putting in a mineshaft entrance, and that's gonna lead to this sugarcane farm. Let's refer back to World of Warcraft and take a look at the Dagger Hills, the mountain range that inspired my terrain in the first place. At the end of the range, there's a lonely little mineshaft entrance that's actually the exit to the Dead Mines dungeon. This is a perfect fit, and I'll be basing my entrance design on this model. Unfortunately though, I won't be recreating the Dead Mines because as fun as that would be, I've got a video to finish here. So maybe I'll bookmark that idea for later, and in the meantime, I'm instead gonna be basing my cave design on the simpler mineshafts that approach the Dead Mines. I've already been hard at work and creative making the design, and you know the drill at this point. Kick back, relax, and enjoy the time. Wait. Oh, what's up? I mean, come on, man, this is getting repetitive. It's like your 4th time lapse today. Oh, really? That's funny because I actually don't remember asking you. Oh, well, that's really funny because I don't remember what the last dozen ones have looked like. Are you gonna build something fast or build something fast? Leave me alone. No, I'm at the edge of my seat right now. What, are you gonna give me a little panning shot? Play some C418? I think they're cool. At least try not to bore everybody. People really like them. Oh, don't blow smoke up your chimney. Fine, well, what would you have me do? Well, I don't know, man, it's your video. Are you kidding me right now? I'm just pointing out the obvious. No, you're just complaining, and you're wrong. Also, you're not real. Good riddance. I'm as real as they get. Man, it feels good to finally see daylight again. So before I give you guys the full tour, I want to address a couple things. First, as you might have noticed in the time lapse, the construction of the sugarcane farm was a bit scuffed. TLDR, I didn't realize mobs could spawn in the sugarcane, and since the rest of the area is lit up, it ended up turning into a bit of a mob farm, which on its own wouldn't be that big of a deal, but fun fact, creepers are completely camouflaged in sugarcane, and that led to some unfortunate setbacks. No. I had to be on high alert down there, and man, I'm hard pressed to say that I've ever been more freaked out playing this game. The next thing I need to address is deeply saddening. The leather worker is dead, 3 of my farmers are dead, and the last one is a zombie, which that part's actually fine. And to my surprise, I actually found one of the farmers who wandered all the way back down to the breeder, so you know, that's cool. I looked back at the footage and big surprise, it was a baby zombie. And I should have lit this area up with torches, it just didn't occur to me at the time, and now I get to pay the price. Because I basically have to do that whole process all over again, and it is going to be so much fun, I'm sure. Okay, all done, and thankfully it actually went a lot smoother the second time around. I just used the same dropping trick that I mentioned earlier, and it went off without a hitch. I also went ahead and zombie cured them while I was at it. But I digress, let's actually get going with the tour now. We begin at the entrance here, which, as I mentioned earlier, is based around the model from World of Warcraft. I had fun messing around with the roof, trying to give it the right shape, but my one reservation here is that I wish I could have used something a little bit more red for the material. Nether brick seemed to be the best fit though, so I'm gonna stick stick with that for now. Perhaps mangrove wood might work better down the road when I update my world. On the other hand, a more successful material choice was the floor, which is a mix of light gray terracotta and mushroom blocks. I based this off of the brown floors in game, and I'm imagining that it's supposed to represent built up dust and debris. I like this choice because, as you'll see when we get down into the mines, it really helps to break up all the gray from the stone walls. Anyways, when I go on inside here, I made the interior just like it was in game, with structural pillars in the middle and a wood retaining wall surrounding the room to keep the excavated walls at bay. There are all sorts of details here that'll be recurring as we go deeper into the mines, such as the stacks of barrels, a pulley made out of a grindstone and chain, or the broken rail line down the middle, which, if I go ahead and follow, will lead to the first cave here that connects right into a vertical pulley shaft that presumably would take supplies up and down from the cave down below. From here on out, the designs are all going to be based on the aforementioned mineshaft caves that approach the dead mines, and this vertical shaft is the first example of that. I do have the option to just jump down from here, but instead, if I make my way across, I'll be brought into a large cave which begins the bulk of our tour. All of the caves down here were designed using variations of different details I pulled from the game. Things like retaining walls, support pillars and beams, bridges, also the floor material, which you can really see the benefit of down here since, again, it helps to balance out all the gray. And also, I'm just now realizing that it's a good middle ground color between the stone and wood. Haha. Whatever, okay? I like it. Shut up. A big goal I strive for down here was to make each area feel unique and identifiable, so for one, I don't get lost, and also just to make things a little more interesting. And by that same token, I also wanted to make the experience down here immersive and engaging, which is why I also designed the layout to have a bunch of different interconnected cave routes, so there's a lot of different ways to get around. Case in point, going either left or right will both bring you down to the sugarcane farm, and how about we go right first? This route has a collapsed mineshaft on the side, and if I continue to make my way down, I'll be brought to the bottom of the vertical shaft I showed a minute ago. A fun little detail I added was the use of a composter, open fence gate, and grindstone to make a wheelbarrow for excavating rock. But you don't really care about that, do you? No, you want to see the sugarcane farm, which happens to sit right underneath the bridge in this large cavern. I love how well this room turned out because I wanted to try and make this rectangular farm feel like it was part of an organically shaped cave, and I think I did a pretty good job of merging the two together. I'll go over the farm design in a minute, but I'd like to finish the rest of the tour first. If I continue over the bridge, I'll be brought into this large room here, and going right will bring you back up to the left side of the area we started in. Along the way, there's another one of those wheelbarrows in a test mine, and on the other side, there's a natural window that looks down to the sugarcane farm below. Another detail you'll also see sprinkled around here are little cobwebs in nooks around the beams. I made a point to semi-hide them because their texture is just a little too bright, and placing them out in the open felt like more of an eyesore than an enhancement. But anyways, moving back into this large room here, and I think this is my favorite part of the area. Besides, you know, the sugarcane farm, of course. There's a lot of different places to go. Over and under the bridge, there's a whole area back there. Obviously, you know, there's a sugarcane farm behind us and so forth. The abandoned minecart here is a nice touch as well, and overall, I just think this room represents the best medley and variation of elements and details. Now, bear with me here, because I'm about to break your immersion. If I head over the bridge, you'll notice that this is where the mine starts to end. I decided that it would be better to leave a few open ends because doing so makes the area so much more interesting. For instance, instead of having this section here that splits off into two exits, I could have easily just put a wall right here and called it good, since the only place I'm going to be going is to the left. But by adding this in anyways, it gives the illusion of choice. Instead of approaching this area and feeling forced to go left, it's instead my decision, and that makes a huge difference. Also, these exits are just here for potential expansion in the future. Oh yeah, and going underneath the bridge here also leads to a dead end. Shucks. If I go ahead and take that left route, I'll be brought into probably the least interesting cave of the tour, but that's okay because right next to it is the sugarcane storage system, which I'll be going over in a second, but for now, just know that it leads back out to underneath the vertical shaft. Okay, let's talk about this sugarcane farm. It's a 20 by 36 field that's harvested using a flying machine on a timer and collected with minecarts underneath the farm. The original design is by Sugarcraft, but this version here is my iteration solution that made a few changes to the harvesting and collection process. First, I didn't want the minecarts running back and forth constantly, so I developed a system that stops them at a station and sends them out as soon as the flying machine comes back from a harvest. Once they're sent out, they'll grab all the sugarcane above and come to an unloading station, which will do its job and send them back to their starting position. The unloading stations are hooked to an AND gate, which will trigger a clock to the droppers that'll spit the items into a water stream going to storage. This means that anytime any station gets items in it, all stations will spit out items if they have any. I'll admit that this system might be a bit overkill. It's possible I could have just funneled all the drops into a single dropper or just not done the AND gate altogether. But I'm not gonna worry about it. It works, it's cool, and most importantly, it was another great redstone exercise for myself. Anyways, the other change I made had to do with the harvest timer. In Shulkercraft's video, it was a maxed out hopper clock, which comes out to a little over 4 minutes. But you can actually get better rates if you use either a 10-minute clock or a 40-minute clock, which doesn't sound intuitive, I know, but hear me out. Sugarcane grows by collecting random ticks, which occur randomly. Every 16 random ticks, it'll grow by a block, and that occurs on average every 18 minutes. Here's where it gets interesting. If a block covers the sugarcane suddenly, like a flying machine for instance, that will reset the built up random ticks on the sugarcane below. So this essentially means that you can harvest at the wrong time and reset a bunch of random ticks that might have been close to growing. Check out this ilmango video if you want to learn more about this. He does a bunch of tests and comes to the conclusion that the best clock is 41 minutes. However, this is by a close margin, and a 10-minute clock is nearly as good and much more practical for my purposes, so that's what I went for. Initially, I installed a daylight sensor, which in theory should work perfect. 10 minutes of daytime, 10 minutes of nighttime. But in practice, I noticed that it wouldn't always trigger since I usually slept through the night, and that oftentimes meant that the sensor would never switch off. So I disconnected that and instead hooked up a fail-safe 10-minute clock that utilizes the item despawn timer. It takes an item 5 minutes to despawn, so a dispenser will spit one out, that despawns 5 minutes later, which triggers a second one. 5 minutes later, that one despawns, which will trigger the farm and start the clock over again. Real simple. It just requires a bunch of throwaway items, and hey, look at that. There's also a line to manually trigger the flying machine, which hooks up to the storage system interface. There's no practical reason for this. I just like being able to hit a button and watch my farm work. And it actually took a bit of finagling here to get things positioned just right, but I think it makes a big difference. By the way, like I mentioned earlier, mob-proofing this area was a bit of an issue, and I ultimately solved this problem by using trapdoors to bring in light from below. It was the best solution that hid the lighting and didn't interfere with the flying machine. The only downside is I had to sacrifice about 40 sugarcane plots to do it. A small price to pay for no creepers. Anyways, there's two different parts of storage here, the actual storage for the farm and the shulker shipping station. I'll start with the actual storage, and from this end of the interface, it appears pretty normal. I have access to the hoppers too, which is nice, but in the back, there's a bit more going on here. This design is my attempt to solve a common problem I've encountered with storage where the first hopper will overflow and the following items will go past it and funnel into the next chest over. My ink farm is a good example of this. As you can see, these chests are filling up, but there's a trickle of other items in the following chests. I wanted to prevent this issue and have each column fill at a time, even if the hoppers got clogged up during the process. And my solution was to use trapdoors to block off the next set of hoppers and hook them to comparators reading the top of each column. When the hopper at the top of a column is full, the comparator will unlock the next trapdoor and trigger a redstone lamp, indicating that the next column is now active. I later adjusted the comparator circuits to send the signal when the hoppers are almost full, that way there wouldn't be any item clumping. And it works, albeit the redstone isn't very elegant, and it's not tileable either, so there's definitely room for improvement, but for the purposes of this project, it'll work just fine. Moving on to the shulker shipping station, and probably the first question you're asking is, what's that? Well, the basic idea is I wanted a place to load the sugarcane into shulker boxes and ship them off to a station where I'll craft them into sugar, which doesn't exist yet. Hold that thought. Okay, so here's how this works in practice. I'll take some sugarcane out of storage and fill this box up. When it's full, I'll hit this note block, which will collapse it and dispense the next shulker, and the collapsed one will get sent to the sugar station. Over here, it's the same interface, hit the note block, and that same shulker will get spat out, and right from there, I can convert the sugarcane into sugar. Once I'm done, I'll hit the note block again, which will send the empty box back over to the first system, and I can take my sugar and use it to tame the donkeys I'll have over here. I did go ahead and install a couple barrels just to have a little storage. This way I can have a surplus, and every time I run out, I can just send over 2 more shulker boxes, craft that up, and restock. But I'm not done, because there's also a second feature to this system, which is the ability to pull all the shulker boxes out by switching off this lever. A piston will move the note block back and forth, cycling through all the stored shulker boxes, and a diverted water stream will send them over to a barrel at the front of the interface. The only caveat here is it needs to stay on for me to pull the boxes out. If it isn't, then the barrel will just empty out and the boxes will go back into the system. This means the barrel also serves the dual purpose of being the input for more shulker boxes. I added this whole feature because I have a limited supply of shulker boxes on my world and I want to conserve them where I can. But at the same time, I also want to start utilizing them for storage, and this seemed like a good middle ground. So in practice, I'll use this system as is. I have 9 shulker boxes in there right now, and when the time comes to finally transport all my stone reserves, I'll pull them out and borrow them for that task. Lest we forget, the original goal of this whole Westfall project is to move my excess stone reserves over here and mass trade them to my villagers. Oh, this rabbit hole has gone deep. That was a lot of work for just some sugarcane. And this is just part of the whole donkey breeding ranch, which, let's be honest, is just a massive tangent from the stone trading setup that founded the Westfall project in the first place. And I can go even deeper than that, because, let's be honest, this thing is just another tangent from the Bedrock project. So I've got a tangent within a tangent within a tangent, which is kind of impressive, to be honest. Anyways, let's get moving here, and now that I'm all set up, it's actually time to test out this ranch. Let's review. I'm gonna be breeding the donkeys at the barn, the offspring will get sent to the stables, and from there I'll wait for them to mature into adults, after which I'll feed them sugar and tame them. Then finally, I'll speed test them at the track, and from there determine if they'll go back to the breeder or go back to Valhalla. So I've been trial running here for the last 2 hours, and so far I'm pleased to report that things have been going really well. The workflow is pretty smooth because of the layout. For each donkey I test, there's barely any extra travel time since the speed track brings me right to the next destination. The most I ever have to travel is when I go back to the stables to fetch another donkey, but there's definitely some downtime in between breeding cycles, so I don't really mind the walk. By the way, I'd just like to say for the record that I'm very glad I made that sugarcane farm. I'm already ripping through my supply, and it's nice knowing I got that end covered. Sugar makes such a difference. Normally, it'd be like a minute or 2 of screwing around with this guy and getting thrown off, but instead, after giving him the 34 sugar, it's 100% guaranteed, and the only variability is how long you have to wait before getting the hearts, which usually doesn't take long. I tend to keep about 3 or 4 saddles on me to mount these guys, but I'm considering having some storage nearby. I'll probably end up switching out one of the sugar barrels or something. Okay, so I just tested this guy right here, and he's almost my fastest donkey yet with 16. I've been using signs to indicate the speeds of each of my donkeys here. That way I can know the slowest ones to weed out first, and in this case it looks like 21, this guy right here. For reference, a value of 16 is 10.3 meters per second, and this guy here with 21 is 9.5 meters per second. But don't get too attached to that reference, because eventually my donkeys will get so fast that it'll drop below 0. And when that happens, I'll have to adjust the timer by coming down here and decreasing the repeater delay. Now is also a good time to mention this thing again, which is the clock for the reset timer, and I've been lowering it as I go here, since I only need to reset for like 25 items and not the full 50 that I have in there. The clock itself, by the way, is a pulse extender designed by Cortezarino. I forgot to mention that earlier. You'll find the link to his video down below, along with everything else. All right, I think I covered everything I wanted to talk about, except... No, I shouldn't show that on camera. I'll just skip over it. Although, I have been saving all these duds in here for the grand debut of the Reign of Fire, and I mean, come on. It'd be rude, actually, not to show it. I've got one more dud right here, and I'm gonna throw him in, and at this point, I genuinely have no idea how many donkeys are in here. Probably somewhere around 20, maybe. It's a lot, and it's gonna get messy. All right, moment of truth. Here we go. Okay, moment of truth. Bye, donkeys. I'm a bad man. Going by the saddles, it looks like I had 25 donkeys in here. So there you go, I slaughtered 25 donkeys. At this point, I can confidently say that this project is a success. I can now efficiently breed and speed test my donkeys and dispose of the washouts. But I'm not done with this project because the ranch itself is still looking quite sparse. And if I'm gonna continue to work here, I'll need some aesthetics to go with it. First off, I'm thinking it would be good to have some additional stables up here to store the regular horses I've got around my world. It's important to note that this setup will work for all kinds of horses, not just donkeys. So it makes sense to keep my horses here also in case I ever want to work with them as well. I want these stables to be small and simple so as not to pull the attention away from the barn. There's a lot of open space at the bottom of the western mountain range, which is a perfect location to put them since it's out of the way and because they can nestle a bit into the notches of the mountains. The design I came up with is pretty simple. Again, I didn't want to draw too much attention away from the barn by making them big and detailed, but I did use the same material palette. My logic here is I wanted to have enough space to potentially have one of each of the different horse types, which there are 36 of. Each of these stables has 16 slots, so with 3 of them, I've got 48 total, more than enough for each horse, plus some wiggle room. They all point into a dead end in the mountain, which doesn't feel great, so I thought I'd make it more interesting by adding a little well at the end of each of them, just as a little added detail. But then after that, I thought, well, it's a bit repetitive if I do that for all 3, so I came up with the idea to put a mini mineshaft entrance by the middle one. Look at it, it's so cute. It doesn't lead to anything just yet. I'd like to connect it up with my sugarcane caves eventually, but for now, it's just another open-ended idea. Anyways, let's go fill these stables with my horses. Coincidentally, I've kept all my horses in between the Westfall project and my main base, so they're very close by. I also have some skeletal horses here as well, but I'm not gonna bring them over since you can't breed them. All right, and there we go. Very nice. One thing I love about this design is on the outside, the horses stick their heads out perfectly. It's great. But anyways, what's next? Well, I actually have a confession to make. I built a wheat farm off camera. And here it is. Just a little thing, nothing too fancy. All those hay bale roofs have cost a ton of wheat, and I desperately needed to address it, which is why I built this farm, except I'm lying. This isn't my wheat farm. It's not even on the Let's Play world. This is my wheat farm. I built it right next to my sugarcane caves underground, and it's pretty much just an open field for manual farming. The only redstone feature is an auto harvest that opens up trapdoors and lets down water streams. I wanted some control over how much I harvested at a time, so instead of just one master switch that harvests the whole thing, I have these buttons along the wall that correspond to each row of trapdoors. Part of this is for lag reasons, since if I harvested the whole thing at once, it'd be a PowerPoint, but I also think it just makes this farm way more interesting to have different options for how to use it. I do have master switches at each corner also, so I can do a full harvest if I so choose, and in fairness, it does look pretty cool. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are loathing the idea of replanting this thing, but hear me out, get good. No, honestly, it actually goes pretty quick since I've got a speed 2 beacon set up here, and most importantly, a rapid click macro. So all I have to do is just run and hold down the macro and I can blaze through it. Here, I'll even time myself. Let's see how quickly I can replant this whole thing. And clocking out here at just about 7.5 minutes. Bam! Easy. That's probably about 10 minutes total down here if I factor in harvesting and collection, and I think it'll make for a great way to pass the time when I'm breeding my donkeys. While I'm in between things up there, I can just come on down, do a little work, and head back up when it's time. By the way, I've got my watch out here so I can keep a close eye on, you know, the time. This way I can make sure to go to bed right away and hopefully avoid any more villager incidents. Over here is the storage area, usual kind of deal. I've got carrots and potatoes if I want. This chest here is supposed to be for beetroot, but you know, composter setup over here. Hey. Also, there's a hidden ender chest. Who would have guessed? And while I'm at it, there's one here, here, and another one here. Oh, and don't even get me started on the secret passageways. there's a lot I don't tell you. By the way, I do actually have a time-lapse sequence edited together for this one, but I'm not going to show it for the sake of moving along here. Okay, good. If you are interested in checking that out though, then you can find it on my brand new community Discord server. Here you'll find an extra content channel where I've included a few pieces of interesting content that didn't make it into previous videos, including the time-lapse for the wheat farm. On top of that, there's some other great resources as well, such as a written history of the Let's Play world or information about the mods and hardware I use. I also have a ton of other features that I'm planning on adding as time goes on, so if any of that sounds interesting, links down below. I'd love to have you, and feel free to say hello in general. Anyways, if you do end up watching that time-lapse, you'll notice that I didn't connect the wheat farm to any of the sugarcane caves yet. I decided, like the mini mineshaft entrance, to just leave it open-ended for now, and in the meantime, it's easy enough just to fly in as it is. I'm getting to the point where I'm having more and more ideas for things to put underground here. Initially, I was thinking that it was just gonna be an open and shut project nicely contained within this episode, but I'm giving up on that, and instead, I'm just leaving things open so I can revisit it at a later date. Honestly, I could see a whole episode just devoted to the ideas I have down here. But I digress. Staying on track, it's time to keep adding the aesthetics up top here. The next thing I want to do is add pathways connecting everything up. To begin with, the pathways I have in mind for the whole Westfall project consists of cobblestone, gravel, and light gray concrete powder. I started putting that in down the east side of the mountain, but I stopped once I got to the top and decided to instead go for coarse dirt, and spruce planks. This way the ranch can have its own separate pathway palette and can feel more like its own area. The only catch is I couldn't use the regular dirt since it just turned right back into grass, so for the initial layout, I just temporarily subbed that for more coarse dirt. I'm very pleased with the final layout here. It's designed to make the workflow from station to station go smoothly and obviously just connect everything together. I also added a little decorative horse shelter in the middle here just to fill in some open space, and shortly afterwards I thought it'd make another great secret entrance to the underground. Okay, we're getting closer here, but there's still more work to be done, and one of the big things is developing the custom biome terrain. So far, the only thing I've had here is just plain old green grass, which I don't know if I've shown you enough pictures of Westfall yet, but it don't look like that. I think things would look a lot better if it looked more like this. A simple right click with my shovel on a few thousand grass blocks and this whole area transforms into a dry and droughted biome. Now that all this grass is replaced with pathway blocks, I can also go back and add the dirt in the pathways that I wanted earlier. Very nice. It's funny how much of a difference a little bit of dirt makes. It's subtle, but it makes the paths look so much more detailed. Okay, we're getting very close now, but there's still one thing missing. This ranch needs some trees. And that brings me back to these little guys over here. I mentioned earlier that I intentionally did them this way as custom orange trees. And that's because if you look at the trees throughout Westfall, they're all some shade of orange or yellow, or they're just dead. And I want to add a ton of them all around the Westfall project here, starting today with Ranch Mountain. Now, the task of filling a large area with custom trees is a bit of a tricky one. On one hand, I don't just want to build the same exact tree 50 times in a row, because that won't look very good. But on the other hand, I don't really want to build each tree from scratch, so where's the middle ground? Well, if we look at the trees of Westfall, there are 3 distinct sizes: small, medium, and large. Plus, there's 2 different leaf colors and also the dead ones. So I've already got a good variety of trees that I can recreate to make my forest look interesting. And here's what I came up with. I've got 4 smalls, 4 mediums, and 1 large. Look at these babies. I love how colorful and vibrant they are. Except for the dead ones. I designed each of these guys based around specific trees from Westfall, and the hope is that when I mix them all together, it'll create a convincing and diverse forest. But I still think I should take this a step further because I'm gonna be using some of these trees a lot. Like this small orange one, for instance. So for that reason, I went ahead and designed a few more versions of some of these trees based on how frequently I plan to use them. The orange ones being the most frequently used, the yellow being the second most frequent, and the dead ones at dead last. I only plan on sprinkling a few of them in there. And with that, I've got all the trees that I'll be building over at Ranch Mountain. I've already planned out where they're all going to go and how many I'm going to use. I also made sure that I rotated the schematics around so the trees aren't all facing the same direction, which will make this forest look even better than it already will. So, to finally finish this crazy episode off, let's jump into one final epic time lapse. I don't even want to hear from you. Yeah, that's right. Go. kick back, relax, and enjoy. Well, 18 hours and 115 trees later, and this place is looking crazy. I wanted it to be fairly dense because the rest of Westfall is mostly going to be barren plains land, and I wanted a bit of variety. Little did I know that that was going to require way more time and resources than I was expecting. I don't know, I think I just saw each tree as a quick and simple build and failed to realize how much it would all be added together. But I'm not complaining, it was so worth it because this area looks awesome. And because all the trees have hidden jack-o'-lanterns inside them, they beautifully illuminate the area during the nighttime. Lighting up the trees also means that they're mob-proofed, which is obviously something that's important here since I really want to keep these villagers. But it's not just something I've paid attention to for the trees. Oh no, I can say with confidence that every single block around here has been accounted for and mob-proofed. The mountains are half-slabbed and snow-slabbed, the pathway blocks are non-spawnable, and all the structures have been carefully analyzed and taken care of, which is something I did earlier but was saving to mention till this point. I used a combination of rails, carpets, and hidden lighting to pull it off, and I used a mod called Mini HUD to show a visual overlay of the light levels in order to verify that everything was safe. If you want to check out Mini HUD and all the other mods I use, then go check out my Discord. Anyways, I've got a few finishing touches I'd like to sprinkle around here before I finally call this a finished project. So let me go ahead and do that real quick, and I'll be right back.
6.5 hours later.
Alright, welcome back, and I've gone ahead and added all sorts of details around here to really spruce things up. I've got sections of dilapidated fencing and ornamental lampposts all along the pathways now, and over here I tried making a little detail by stacking two signs on top of each other and putting an armor stand in between them. I think it makes for a cool little wayfinding sign. The other big thing I did was create impressions of fallen leaves at the base of each tree, and I made sure to have the quantity of droppage be proportionate to the size of each tree. You'll also notice that I've sprinkled some shrubberies around the area just as a little added detail. I wasn't sure at first about using grass and ferns since I figured the green would just feel out of place, but it turns out that a little bit of greenery really helps to break up the monotony of all the brown. Plus, this is a droughted biome, and so I must remember that while things shouldn't be growing well, they shouldn't be dead either, so a few green things here and there actually makes a lot of sense. But let's get to the last thing here, because I'm proud to say that my donkey breeding ranch will now be a finished project just as soon as I officially give it its name. I've built this special archway at the main entrance here, and to officially christen the ranch, I'm gonna throw this sign up top. Welcome to Ranch Mountain.
All that for
Donkey breeding setup. Now I can finally get busy here and work to breed a super fast donkey. However, That's easier said than done. Yes, the actual setup is complete, but depending on what speed I'm trying to go for, I could end up working here for hundreds of hours. Basically, the process of improving horse stats is exponential, so to begin with, it's easy and there's major jumps in the donkey's speed, but over time it will become more and more gradual to the point where I'll have to breed literally hundreds of donkeys just to see a tiny stat improvement. All of that's to say, I'm not 100% sure what I want my goal to be. The absolute fastest horse that you can get is 14.23 meters per second, and right now I'm thinking that 12 meters per second is a good starting point. But instead of just doing that off camera here, I think it'd be a lot more fun if I live streamed my progress. And that's why I'm excited to announce that on Friday, May 31st at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'll be live at twitch.tv/coolingmystery, grinding away at my ranch here, trying to get a 12 meters per second donkey. Like I said, I don't know how long this will take me, so it might end up turning into multiple streams. We'll have to see. Either way, I'd love to see you guys there if you can make it. Feel free to stop by and say hello. And in the meantime, I'm already gearing up for the final episode of the Westfall project, which you're not gonna want to miss, so make sure you're subbed, and please, if you wouldn't mind liking the video, that would help me out tremendously. Thank you guys for watching, and now, if you'll excuse me, it's time to seek the penance I deserve for my crimes. See you guys in the next one.